Welcome, everybody. Good evening. Happy New Year. It's been a couple of weeks since we've seen each other last. I hope everyone had a happy and safe holiday. I just wanted to thank everybody for joining us this evening. I know that there's a lot going on right now in our national conversations and probably on everybody's phones and TVs. And I recognize that it might be a little bit hard to concentrate tonight. But I do thank you all so much, not just for participating in the Civic Leadership Academy in general and committing to an 11-week course like this, which is amazing in and of itself, but also for showing up tonight and bringing your probably already exhausted minds forward to engage in civic leadership and in community and in conversations that are in the spirit of coordination with your local government. So just thank you all. I appreciate you for being here. If you need to take a break, please feel free. We'll try to get through tonight together, and you all give me hope. So happy to have you. Just a quick housekeeping note. I want to remind everybody that if you are speaking and asking a question, if you could please just identify yourself, just say your name and maybe the neighborhood where you're from so we can all get familiar with one another. And it just makes it a little bit easier to follow with so many people in the Zoom conversation as well. And so we have a lot to go over tonight. I'll give a brief overview of our agenda. So first we're going to hear from the Assistant Director of Operations and Administration in the Department of Public Safety, Lee Schmidt. Second, we will hear from the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police. We'll hear from Pittsburgh Police Chief Scott Schubert, Sergeant Tiffany Klein-Costa, and Sergeant Colleen Bristow. And then finally, we will hear from Laura Dragowski of our new Office of Community Health and Safety, and Joshua Snyder as well from the Office of Community Health and Safety to finish us up with a Narcan training and a presentation about their new office as well. So we are already running a little bit late on time, so I'm going to kick it right over to Lee. Lee, thank you for being with us tonight.
Sure, thanks for having me, and welcome everybody. Thank you for spending some time learning more about your government. And obviously we're having some challenges with that today, and we can all make it through, I think. So I wanted to talk a little bit about public safety and my role in public safety and what public safety administration does. So public safety administration is the overall umbrella that police, fire, EMS, as well as a number of other smaller bureaus and offices fall under. My role as assistant director is, well, to assist our director, but I oversee the operations and administration. So that means I handle a lot of coordination between the bureaus and communication there, as well as budgeting, payroll, purchasing offices, grants, and some policy development and review on a higher level as far as, general bureau wide or departmental wide. You'll hear more from police, fire, and EMS separately, but under public safety, we also have our administrative staff that assists with the payroll, the budgeting, purchasing, and we also have our animal care and control, which consists of 14 animal control officers, a supervisor, plus an administrative person. They handle any animal complaints and concerns, as well as enforce the city ordinances. And they work with local animal shelters as well as state animal control and enforcement officers. So, if you have an issue with a loose dog, things like that, they're the ones that come and take them, and they try to do their best to get them to their owner. And if they can't find them right away, they'll take them to a local shelter. Another group that reports directly to me is our special events office. This is a group that a lot of people don't realize might exist, but they actually do a lot of things for our city. Unfortunately, with COVID, they haven't done a lot in the past year, but they are the ones that handle our farmers markets, which they did do this year, the movies in the park, which they pivoted to drive-ins, so that worked out pretty well. They also did the Great Race. They did it virtually this year, but they normally coordinate that. They do the holiday decorations for the city-county building, as well as the gingerbread competition, if you all have ever seen that before. In addition to that, they help and coordinate a lot of other events throughout the city. I know they have the Valentine's Day skating, some other smaller events, and another big part of their job is to process and review any special event permit. So any permit for parades, for block parties, for other 5Ks or, races, anybody that wants to shut a street down or a roadway down to hold an event, they have to apply for a permit, and that goes through the special events office, and they review those along with multiple entities from the city and public safety, Port Authority, to review any impacts and any concerns that any of those groups, departments, bureaus may have. Another addition to public safety is emergency management. Again, this is a department a lot of people don't hear about or know about, but it does a lot of important things. They handle all the planning, preparation, mitigation, coordination of disaster relief, any critical incidents. They work with the special events office, for bigger events like 4th of July and Great Race, things like that. They also review addressing. So when there's a new housing development or street name change, they review that to help make sure that public safety doesn't have any concerns as far as, duplicative street names or duplicative addresses. Because if we have, 2 First Avenues with the same address number, that can cause a lot of confusion, even if it's in 2 completely different ends of the city. And in addition, they support all the bureaus with some special equipment and resources that they maintain and work with the state and the region and PEMA and FEMA for to help get that funded and get it coordinated or get it sent here as needed. Lastly, the other 2 groups that we have that are, one is kind of re-envisioning itself and changing a bit, and the other one's a new one, which you'll hear about later as well. One is the Office of Community Services and Violence Prevention, and then finally the Office of Community Health and Wellness, which again, you'll hear a little more about that later. So that's the basics of our department. Myself, I've been in public safety for 25 years now. Been a paramedic for 24 of those years. An EMT prior to that, and I was a paramedic out in the suburb for 20 years prior to coming to the city as the business administrator for the police bureau for about 3.5 years. And then in March of 2020, I got promoted to assistant director of public safety, which was fantastic timing on my part. I got promoted just in time to get put involved with a pandemic. So I don't really have anything else. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to field those or answer those.
Great. Thank you so much for that overview, Lee. Let's take a look and see if there's some raised hands. Yeah, so it looks like Larry has a question. Larry, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, thank you, Lee. Larry Sims from the Strip District, and I have a very particular question about special events. The Strip is obviously geographically a strip bounded by a hill and a river. We have 4 through streets, which are often, if not usually, under construction. There are 24 people on our Civic Association board, and in addition, I've talked to many 4th and 5th generation Penn Avenue merchants. No one can ever recall being asked by special events whether closing a street would be a good idea. Often it happens without anybody's knowledge. And when you shut down one of those 4 arteries, when 2 of them are closed, and of course, coming up about a year from now, Liberty is going to be closed for an extended period of time, we're really worried that nobody's going to be able to get around, and that public safety vehicles will be seriously hampered in trying to access our neighborhood. I've only been here 2 years, but in that time, and from what I've heard for a long time, efforts to contact the special events office have all dead-ended. We never hear back from anybody. So what can we do to work with the special events office, and particularly to plan for the reality of problems if one of those major streets is blocked on top of all the existing construction going on?
Well, that's a good question, and not necessarily an easy one or a quick answer. But you can definitely contact myself, and then our manager for special events, his name is Brian Cates. It's Katze. So the city's emails are just, our first name dot last name, for myself or for him. And I think maybe we could have a conversation with your office. One of the reasons I was brought on was to help with special events. They used to be in the Parks Department, so public safety had very little input on them, and then they were moved into public safety because of similar concerns that there were a lot of events being planned that public safety had no input on. So we're still trying to change that process and improve that process. We do take into account roads being closed, things like that, and the Port Authority is a big input on that. Now, the only thing I will say is we are strictly an advisement board on that. We can recommend the denial and try not to approve it, but there are times that we are unable to deny permits for a number of different reasons. If other organizations have had a similar permit in the past, we have to make sure we explain why. If it can be because of a road closure, we can no longer close the road that we closed 3 years ago because these 2 roads are now closed because of construction. That's reasonable, but it can be a challenge. And I'm not trying to skirt the question. It's just more a time thing. So maybe we can try to schedule a time to get together with your neighborhood group, and Brian and I can go over that a little, maybe how we can get you more involved in the process, or at least make you notified. We do kind of leave it on the permit holder to notify the neighbors and neighborhood. And if that's failing, you could let us know, and then we can always bring that up to them in the future when they apply for permits that, that didn't get done last time, that will be considered for future permits. And there's other factors, we tell them how many police officers they should have, and if they need to have paramedics on standby, that kind of thing. And from a strip district standpoint, that is a hub for us. You probably are aware that up the street is our fueling station, as well as our public safety warehouse. So we need to have access to that as well pretty easily. Does that kind of answer your question, Larry?
It's a good start, and
Okay.
I will follow up with you. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Perfect, thank you. And Larry, feel free to reach out to me as well to help facilitate that conversation. Happy to be of support to all parties here. Let's see, we'll do one more for Lee. Bill, it looks like you have a question.
Find all my buttons here. Thanks, Lee. I guess my question, I'm curious about, and you mentioned, like you're getting a promotion right in the middle of the pandemic. And I was curious, like right before the elections, all these big protest events and campaigning, with the pandemic going on, and obviously what's happening tonight, how does public safety balance out, in one regard with these kinds of events? Like I really appreciated when we had the big closed downs and these campaign people were trying to come here and have big events. The city and the county said no, but they did anyways. I'm just curious, like, how do you balance that? There's the pandemic, public safety issue, yet there's, people's ability to protest or have campaigns. How do you kind of like walk the fence with all that? Is that something your department and you have to handle personally? I'm just curious. Yeah.
Yeah, so we help coordinate it with and do what we can to support. So every incident is driven by a bureau. So for the pandemic, that is an EMS driven event. So we're doing what we can to work with the health department and our EMS to make sure they have the resources they need. And basically, the Public Safety Administration's job is to make sure they have those. And if they don't, then we reach out to whether it's the governor's office or Department of Health or FEMA, whatever, to get them those resources. And it can be a challenge for sure. I know when you get to the police, they'll be able to tell you it's been a challenging year for all of us in public safety. It's a lot of hours and a lot of time. You know, when we see, you know, even like what's happening today and over the summer, we try to change schedules. We do increase the amount of people out. You know, we have police officers switch to 12-hour shifts as needed. We cancel days off. You know, we manage what we can, and we do get a lot of support luckily from our outside agencies and partners like state police, suburban EMS agencies. We are lucky to have the region. So there's a group of counties called Region 13 that consists of actually 14 counties now, and the city of Pittsburgh as its own entity to help coordinate efforts in resources as needed. So if we need fire or EMS from Westmoreland County or wherever, we can get that to us pretty quickly. So that's an emergency management function, and it is part of public safety. It's it is definitely a balancing act, and the challenge a lot of times is not having people on those 12-hour shifts for too long or too much. We also do whatever we can to, when they are on those, to, you know, keep them comfortable, get them some food. Same with the paramedics, you know, we try to give them some time off, make sure they get some rotations through. We also have through our Office of Community Health and Wellness, even before this, we do have some counseling groups that we work with to make sure the mental health and wellness of the providers is good. You know, it can be very stressful for people, and we try to do what we can to help them if they need help, try to talk to them. We do have, the police has their PMAP group. EMS is part of that as well. It's, you know, fellow officers, paramedics, firefighters that can sit down and talk to each other, you know, when you're having a hard time. We've all been there, and we've seen things that nobody wants to see, and it's hard to process. So we do what we can. Like I said, I know our director is, he was a city paramedic for 5 years, and then he went into the FBI for 25 years. He's seen, you know, a lot of things over the years, Oklahoma City bombing, 9/11. And he even said, this is the worst year for public safety. As far as, you know, it's just an ongoing thing. The pandemic has lasted much longer than we all hoped or anticipated. And the civil unrest, you know, has been, you know, people need to voice their opinions, and that's great, but it can be a challenge for sure, especially when you get two groups against each other.
Thank you, Lee, and thanks, Bill, for your question. Okay, well, I think we can close up this first part of our presentation. Lee, thank you so much for joining us. We like to give virtual claps. Let's see if anyone else wants to join me there. So thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for your service to the city of Pittsburgh.
Sure, thank you. Thanks for coordinating this.
Of course. So next, I'm going to kick it over to our Chief of Police, Scott Schubert.
Hello, everybody. I hope everybody's having a good day. You know, it's unfortunate what we're seeing in DC. It's a sad day for our country. How that affects us here locally, we reach out to our partners with the state police, the county police, other federal agencies, you know, in our real-time crime center and intelligence, just to make sure there's nothing planned or no chatter of anything going on locally. And, you know, unfortunately, like everybody else, watching in disbelief of what's going on with that. So I just wanted to start with that. Thank you for letting me be here. I'm going to keep this somewhat brief on my end the best I can because we have two outstanding leaders within the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police with Sergeant Tiffany Costa and Sergeant Colleen Bristow, who are going to talk to you about some of the incredible things that they've been working on to help improve community relations and to help people from, as Colleen will talk about, diverting people so they don't necessarily go to jail, that we can get people the help that they need. But real quick, I'll just start off with my background. I've been with the Pittsburgh Police for 28 years, and I love Pittsburgh. I love being a Pittsburgh cop. I love our communities. You know, I love the people that I've gotten an opportunity to meet, and I think we're just an amazing city. We have our issues, like everybody else. We have our problems, we have our challenges. But one thing that I've always loved about Pittsburgh is how we come together in times of tragedy or challenges. And no matter who we are, no matter what we do, no matter where we're from, we all come together and unite. And that's one of the things that I've always loved about where we live. So been with Pittsburgh 28 years, started out in Zone 5 in East Liberty as a patrol officer, became a detective doing crime scenes in the mid-90s, got promoted to sergeant in 98 and went to the North Side Station for about 8 months, and then went back to investigations in East Liberty to oversee the mobile crime unit. Got promoted to lieutenant in 2001 and went to the Squirrel Hill Station and was there for a couple years and was the acting commander there for probably about a year and a half, I guess, when Commander Costa got shot in 2001. And from there, went to major crimes in 2003. If you all remember, we had the city went into financial distress, and we had to lay off 102 police officers, close a couple stations, eliminate our special deployment division. And so that was a challenge, but with every challenge comes an opportunity on how you can do things differently. And that plays out, throughout my whole career, I've seen that, but you always overcome and you take that challenge as an opportunity to do things differently. But I went to major crimes. I also did our emergency preparedness coordinator as a lieutenant under Chief McNeely at headquarters. And then I had an opportunity to get promoted to commander in 2007, January 2007, and took over our special deployment division that was reopened in the West End. And then I they reopened the West End station for the communities, and there was 15 communities that I was responsible for. And I did both stations for 8 years. Loved it, loved every aspect of, working with the community to make things better. And I also loved having the specialty units because I was involved with everything that they did citywide. So I still had the opportunity to do things citywide and still had the opportunity to do things in each community in the West End and Brookline, Beachview, and Banksville. And in 2014, end of 2014, I got promoted to assistant chief of operations. That's all of our uniform personnel. And then November of 2016, I was asked to step in as the acting chief of police. And in February of 2017, was sworn in as the chief. And I'm still here, love what I do, and want to keep doing everything I can to help make our department as best as possible to serve the citizens. And as Lee had mentioned, we had a challenging year, and I can tell you in my 28 years with Pittsburgh Police, I'd never seen anything like it before. And I think it's the duration of everything going on with the pandemic that we never really experienced before, changing how we do things to protect ourselves, protect the community, protect our families, and having people that go off for quarantine. At one time, we had 130 some police officers off because of exposures and whatnot, and probably over 100 that tested positive, well over 100 that tested positive at one time or another. Thankfully, nobody was, seriously ill that passed away like so many, people did, sadly and tragically across Pennsylvania, across the country, and across the world. And then we did have the civil unrest, for a number of months, and but out of all of that, as I said before, you look at the challenge and you turn it into an opportunity, and that's what we've been doing for the last several months, is working on how can we do things different? What are we missing? What should have we been doing that we weren't? And how can we improve upon things, that the programs that we have and whatnot? And I think that gives us a great opportunity to really evaluate what we do. And I've always been a firm believer in working with the community and community policing. It's something I've always done my whole career, no matter what assignment I'd been in. And last year, or may have been even in 2019 at some point, but we created the office, the community engagement office. And what I was looking for was somebody to oversee all of our community engagement throughout the city, because we have community resource officers, we have neighborhood resource officers in all the zones. And what I saw is everybody was doing great things, but they were all doing somewhat different things, and there was no consistency on how we do things. And I saw this officer at Zone 6 who I just couldn't believe the connection that she had with the community and in the schools with the students, and it just blew me away. And that's now Sergeant Tiffany Costa. And you'd go into schools to watch them. I'd show up at different things, and the level of respect amongst each other, the level of trust. She'd walk down the hallway and kids were yelling out, "Miss Tiffany, Miss Tiffany," and it was just incredible. And sorry, I'm sharing this story, Tiffany, but when she was taking the sergeant's exam, I was so excited, because I needed somebody to take that position when we created it. And I think she was hesitant on taking the promotion because she loved what she was doing. And I asked her, we'll get you in there. In that position before we can move them into different areas. And I didn't create the position, I didn't fill it, and I waited. And she did some time on the street. She did an incredible job there. And then when the time came, we created it, and she's taken it way above what I was even thinking that we could do with that office. And it's going to continue to grow. And as I said, every challenge becomes an opportunity. And a lot of the things we've saw through the civil unrest and everything that everybody's looking at as far as reimagining, policing, the criminal justice system. I'll be honest with you, it's more than that. I think everybody needs to reimagine for this every aspect of city government and the private and public sector on how they do things, and how to ensure that everything is fair and just for everyone. But so she's doing incredible things. So I'm going to let her talk about that stuff. But the Bureau is made up of budgeted for 900 police officers, and it falls under 3 branches. And we have a deputy chief that falls under me, Tom Stanbrecki. And then we have 3 assistant chiefs. And the investigations branch encompasses major crimes. So all your homicide, robberies, burglaries, sex assault, witness protection, computer crimes, mobile crime unit, arson, things like that. And then you have narcotics and vice. And one of the things we did change a couple years ago, maybe a few years ago, is not doing the impact work, but really doing more in-depth investigation. So you're not, in the past, you would see police officers jumping out at people and things like that. We had stopped that. It may even be a little bit longer than that, but we'd stopped that and really doing focused enforcement and getting the ones that are bringing drugs into the community and things like that. And then under operations is the uniform. So you have 6 patrol zones, 1 through 6. And then you have the Special Deployment Division. And with that is your SWAT team, bomb squad, motorcycle unit, impaired driving, collision investigation, and river rescue, and our negotiators. And then the third one is the administrations branch that covers support services. So our warrant office for all the arrests, record room, property room, the training academy, which you'll hear from another excellent supervisor, Sergeant Colleen Bristow, who works in the academy, and some of the things that she's done there to really engage our recruits with the community. And I'll let her speak to that stuff. And, you know, I think I covered everything as far as the department. We're always trying to evolve. We're always trying to see what we do better. We belong to the Major City Chiefs of Police Association, which is about 70-some major police departments across the country. And we're always looking for what the best practices are. As I said, there's an opportunity because every police department in the country, I think, is finally looking at things holistically. You know, because although we're similar in a lot of facets, just in Western Pennsylvania, I'll use that as an example. You know, there are no true equities in the different police departments, because we saw, you know, in East Pittsburgh, when Antoine Rose was shot and killed, you had a police department that had no policies. And, you know, what was the level of their training and equipment and resources and things like that. And that plays true to departments across the, you know, Western Pennsylvania, across the state. You do have MOPEC standards that require what training each department should have, what each recruit should have, and an in-service training. So there's those kind of requirements, but there's so much more that we put into our officers, where a normal thing, and Colleen can, you know, correct me with the amount of time, but let's just say there's 6 months, you know, for the recruit training through the state, or 7 months, whatever it is. We, on top of that, add on another three plus months of academy to go over a lot of the things that we have, a lot of the things that we do, you know, having training where you scenario-based drills on de-escalation and things like that. And then they go through 3 months of working with veteran officers before they go out on their own. So there's a lot that goes on with that, but not everybody has the opportunity to put their people through advanced training because of issues. There's some places, some departments, that if they transport one person to the jail, they have to call somebody in to cover their municipality. So when I say the equity, it's not there. There needs to be a mandate on, policies that, how I operate is how they operate is how they operate. And, body worn camera, I'm a huge proponent of it. We equipped our whole department with body worn cameras. We have tasers. We have less lethal shotguns, based on things that we've seen other places happen where, these resources and tools would have been helpful. And when I'm saying this is other agencies, we've seen this happen in our own. So trying to ensure that we have everything that we can to be prepared and transparent with the community. So I don't want to take all the time, and I apologize, but I just wanted to give you a little, overview of the PBP, and let you know we're committed to doing everything we can to further evolve ourselves and to make sure we're doing the best practice. There was a reform task force, which we have there, the report, and we have our Office of Strategy, Accountability, and Resiliency that I put together probably 6 months ago, somewhere around there, and that's encompasses our policies and really, how we can change different things, how we can, our accountability practices, getting other officers involved in programs, or if we're trying to implement something, so we have buy-in from the whole department, looking at the best practices, accreditation, things like that. So they're working on that report, and a report we did with BPEP and Tim Stevens and others to see what we can enhance in our department. And we worked closely with BPEP when they were working on that. So that's some of the things we're doing. Another thing that I'm doing personally, and I've been doing it for the last probably several months now, is going out into the communities and walking. And that's why I'm kind of stuck in my car. I pulled off to the side, but I wasn't able to get out of work in time. But I went to Morningside, and I walked about little under 5.5 miles, I guess, there, walking their streets, getting to know the community, talking to people. I'll have people that pull up in their cars and talk to me. I'll walk in the street. I'm careful, of course, but I'll walk in the street because I want people to see me. And I do it by myself. And today will be my 41st community that I've walked out of 90. So I still have more to go. We have 90. Some are smaller than others, but I'm still going to hit every one. And I want to give an opportunity for people to engage me and find out what's going on in the communities. And for me to really learn about each community, because we drive through them and you don't really get an opportunity to appreciate the beauty that we have in our city, in all of our communities. And I'm just amazed every time I do it, because I find something new that I didn't know before. And I've worked here 28 years and been around the city, a lot of the communities, and it's just incredible. But it's not for publicity. I know that the media picked up on it. I put it on my Pittsburgh Police Chief, PGH Police Chief Instagram when I go out to these different communities. But it's not about, and that's what I told the media, it's not about publicity. It's about getting to know the communities and hearing it firsthand, not hearing it through other people, hearing it myself. And it helps me with decision making on how I do things. And so I'm blessed. I feel blessed to be able to do that. And I'm going to continue to do it. As I was talking before we started, there's 90 communities, but in all reality, so there's different communities, that I may have to go 2-3 times or more. And I'm committed to doing it. So I'm going to keep going through this. And I'm going to make it a practice that I continue to go through it. And because I think that's the best way I can connect personally with the community, and not just see people see me on the news or at community meetings, but actually see me out on the street walking and talking to them. So sorry it took so long. That was probably more than you wanted to hear, but I just wanted to thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for wanting to learn about city government. It means a lot that you're engaged. It shows that you care about the city. It shows that you care about the community. And sorry it has to be virtual because of the pandemic, but we'll get through this. We'll get through it together, and hopefully someday we can all be together to talk. So I'm going to turn it over to, I'll turn it over to Tiffany, Sergeant Costa, and there may be questions, but when that's done, Sergeant Costa, and she can talk about all the great things that she's doing and her team's doing on the community engagement.
Great. Thank you so much, Chief Schubert. You won't be able to see because you're on your phone, but we're giving you clap emojis.
Oh, thank you.
On
thank
the
you.
Zoom meeting.
Thank you.
So before we move on to Sergeant Costa's presentation, are there one or two questions for the chief before he heads out? Let's see. Larry, it looks like you have a question. Go ahead.
Thank you. Chief, I have a question about staffing. In my neighborhood and a few others, I've been party to some conversations with residents and businesses that feel they need a stronger police presence. And obviously you never have as many resources as you could allocate. But I'm a little surprised and confused by the frequency with which the suggestion to hire off-duty officers comes up. And I'd like to understand how you make those allocation decisions, and if there's a published set of rules or guidelines that dictate when and where officers can work and how much they can do on their own time. And I should clarify that I'm not talking about a special occasion or event, but just the suggestion is to beef up a police presence to suit the community's desires, hire off-duty officers. I'd just like to understand how that works.
So one, and a good question, everything is based off of, we're data-driven police department. Everything we do, all the calls for services, all the complaints, arrests, you name it, traffic stops, all that stuff are factored into manpower allocations. Now, obviously, yeah, I mean, we have 90 communities, and I think everybody would want a police driving through their communities. So we're 6 patrol zones across the city, and in each zone you have 15 or more communities depending on what zone you're in. As far as the detail officers go, when people are telling you to do the detail officers, that's generally for businesses that want extra protection for their own. We can't put a police car there. We can't put a on-duty officer there. You'll have officers driving around. So there are businesses that will hire off-duty officers, but that's on them if they want to do it. To do that, does it help the community? Yeah, it does, because you have a presence there, but it's not designed to help make the community safer when a person's doing it. For the most part, they're doing it for their own sole purpose of their business having there. Whether if it's in a strip district, I know I see a detail officer at Woolies down there, and I've seen other ones in different places. But you bring up an interesting point for me, because it's something I've talked to several people that I know who are helping with the redesign of the strip district with all the construction that's going on. And it's incredible. I mean, I remember the strip district, when I first came on, was completely different. And it's not just a business area anymore. It's a community. So that's one of the things we look at is, this is an actual community now. There's a lot of people living there. There's more construction being done. There's more condos being made. There's more homes being made. And it's becoming, a whole new community. And it's something that we have to evaluate on how we do staff there. Zone 2 is the station that, services your community. I know they do put some beat officers down there from time to time, and I've seen the cars. The one good thing is the pumps are down there, so you have police cars, traveling back and forth, which is a good thing for any community. But that is something we look at now, because the last meeting I was with a person, and he kind of gave me a tour. This is going back probably about 6 months, but gave me a tour because I wanted to know, like, what's the future look like for there? I mean, I saw the buildings going up and whatnot, but like, what's the true community going to look like in the future? And it just blew me away. And it's going to be a full-fledged community. I think it's going to be an asset for our city. But we got to look at how's it going to affect us in the Pittsburgh Police in providing a better service for that community.
Thank you, Chief. And I'm sorry, everyone. I know we have some more questions and we can probably get to right now just because we're super behind. So I'm just going to call, let's see, on Dwayne. And then any other questions we have left over, you can certainly send to me and I'll get them to the right place.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
I was just asking, do you reach out to any of the community leaders to do the walk with you?
I've had some reach out now to do it. I'll be honest with you. I've been doing it for a little while where I don't say where I'm going. I just show up, and a lot of times I don't actually know where I'm going to go because it all goes upon my schedule. But since the media has picked up on it, I've had people reaching out saying, "Hey, we'd be glad to walk with you." I just want to make sure that it's not too big, because we still have to be concerned with the COVID. But it's been incredible because every community I've been in, I've talked to a number of people, and with hearing the true, genuine story of what that individual is experiencing or seeing has been, so insightful for me. And another thing too is finding out the history of the community from people has been incredible. I was in Belts Hoover on Saturday, and I do a lot of this stuff too on my time off, going out. And but I was walking through Belts Hoover, and it was incredible. I ran into a gentleman, and there's no stores or no nothing, and there's homes and stuff. And I just thought it was a community. And he started telling me about when he was growing up, how there was a butcher here, there was a tailor here, there was a corner store here, and streetcars came down this road and whatnot. So it was insightful for me. But I love the one-on-one interaction that I'm getting, because it's not anyone trying to push an agenda or anything else. It's getting stuff right from the people that live in that community. But yeah, I am interested in walking with different people. I just need to make sure, because of the pandemic, that I keep it small.
Yes, sir. So I'm the president of Perry Hilltop Citizens Council. That's what I was saying.
Okay.
We would love to walk through our neighborhood with us. And
Yeah, if you my email is Scott, SCOTT.Schubert, SCHUBERT at pittsburghpa.gov, and Pittsburgh spelled out. And send me an email, and that's one of the communities I still have to do. So I'll be glad to go with you.
yes, sir. I put my email in the chat.
Wear your walking shoes, because we're gonna walk.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Chief
But yeah, I'll be
Schubert,
happy to do it.
yeah, he posts his multiple mile walks on social media occasionally, and it's very impressive. So, all right, thank you so much again, Chief. Thank you for
Thank
your
you.
service to the city, and thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, we're gonna kick it over to Sergeant Costa.
Hi, everybody. I put Chief Schubert's email in the chat, and also my own email, in case anybody wants to reach out for community engagement activities. Like the chief said, the Community Engagement Office opened in 2019. It was actually September of 2019, with the goal of kind of unifying some of the work that was happening for community outreach across the whole city. And so since I started then, we've kind of formed a pretty solid group of all of our community resource officers and neighborhood resource officers, so that we could support each other in our efforts, and then also replicate some of the programs that were happening in specific geographical areas, so that they could be utilized by other spaces. We're also working on quantifying and qualifying some of our activities, so measuring the amount of time we spend within neighborhoods and the different activities we do, focusing on demographics such as youth versus time spent with seniors. We've also had a few really great initiatives since I've gotten started, including Youth Connections, which is a program that that provides officers to the Pittsburgh Public Schools to meet with 9th grade students in their civics classrooms. That's the majority. We also visit with other students too, based on the school population. But in 9th grade civics classes, we focus on rights and responsibilities of youth when interacting with the police, and rights and responsibilities of the police when interacting with the public too. And we do a lot of reverse role play, so that the students can attempt to see what it's like to be a police officer, and see like how communication is the key for all police interactions. We also do a bit of education in those situations, because we visit with the students once a month. So it's very student voice driven. So if there's an incredible interest in like opiates, we may bring in a board or a panel of recovering substance abuse users, or we may, if there's a big focus or interest in the mobile crime unit, we may bring in detectives to describe their work. It's very much developed and tailored to the minds and voices of the students. So far, we're meeting with 9 different schools within the city, and we're hoping to be within every single high school in Pittsburgh Public Schools by the end of this year was our initial goal, but then COVID happened, so hopefully by the end of next school year. The third part of that is recruitment. Ultimately, we would like for our officers and the population of officers to reflect the demographic of the city. So what better way than to recruit city kids, right? And then the fourth piece is that it's not just officers that work in community engagement, but it's patrol officers that attend these functions. So it's like a mental health check for our officers. Like they get the opportunity to really relate with an individual, a youth, one-on-one, and therefore not only does it help like give them perspective about what they're doing and the work they're doing, but also perspective about youth, because we all forget that we were all teens once, right? And so then another initiative we've been working on since COVID is the Need a Mask, Take a Mask program, which provided for anybody in the city to be able to stop at one of the police stations where we had repurposed newspaper boxes that the money bit had been like like repurposed, depurposed, I'm not sure, like deconfigured, I'm not sure how you say that, but you could just open up the box and grab yourself an individually packaged mask and be safe. And then we also partnered with some of the local nonprofits to get bulk amounts of masks out. And we were able to distribute almost 100,000 masks throughout the city through those two sections of the initiative. Another thing we've been doing lately, and so I guess I should have started by saying, like, community engagement is often about like being present in spaces. And since COVID has happened and we've switched to Zoom and social distancing, we've had to kind of recreate what community engagement meant. And so we took a step back and like looked at what the needs of the community were. Masks wasn't obvious, and any kind of PPE. The second thing was just like thinking about basic needs of our community. There were plenty of drive-through diaper drives, tons of drive-through food bank drives. But what about the people that don't have cars and don't have accessibility to things like that? So we started working with partners, churches, and then also the EAT initiative to get boxes of produce and actually deliver them to sites where they could be useful to community members. A lot of that started with immigrant and refugee populations, but then also transitioned into senior citizen populations. So the senior centers, the healthy active living centers throughout the city do grab and go lunch. So we started partnering with them to get boxes of produce to senior citizens, which was incredibly fulfilling whenever the first senior citizen that stops by picks up an apple and they're like, oh, this is the first fresh produce I've had in 3 months. So it's definitely been an interesting time to kind of reevaluate what it means to build community as a police officer and how police can kind of like think outside the box and serve their community. Yeah, I think I'll stop there and take questions, if that's okay, unless anybody wants to hear about my 8 years of experience on the job.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sergeant. And I just wanted to say that there were a few comments in the chat. One said, I work with one of the sites that food is distributed at, and your help has made the process so much smoother.
Excellent.
Yeah, so that is good news. So does anybody have questions right now for Sergeant Costa about her community engagement work? I see one from Jacob.
Hi, Sergeant Costa. I'm from Crafton Heights. My name is Jacob. This might sound like an odd question for engagement, and if it is, you don't need to answer it. I recently got connected with the Global Initiative for Women in Justice at Vanguard, and they do a lot of work around human trafficking. And the human trafficking and community engagement are kind of pairing up in my brain. And so I'm just curious, it's not something really people talk about, and I'm curious how prevalent that might be in Pittsburgh, and how you've seen community engagement maybe solve for that. And if that's not an appropriate question for you, feel free to disregard.
No, Jacob, I spend so much time with teenagers, and one of the things I do is say, like, if you stump me, I'm going to buy you a soda. So I don't feel stumped at all. It's interesting that you bring this up, because truck drivers against trafficking just contacted me recently to talk about how they could work with officers to not only partner, but also educate police on some of the things they see, because those are their spaces. And I think that's really important, because since my office, or the community engagement office, has been formed, one of the things I've been focusing on is creating continuing education for the 27 officers that work throughout the city in community outreach work. And I think it's really important that we keep that very broad and very interesting and very engaging. And also, you know, it's not like the community engagement officers aren't necessarily on patrol all the time. to see things like what might happen at a traffic stop or a truck stop, but they are incredibly involved in the community. So community members may feel safer coming to them with that information. So it's super important for them to know what the signs are. So yeah, so that's something that we are working on, educating our officers about more, and not just the officers that work in my office, but that's something we would like to share with all the officers. You're welcome.
Thank you so much. It looks like we also have a question from Bill.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Sergeant. I wanted to, you mentioned that the education program that you're taking youth through. What are the schools where that's happening now? Did you say there's like 9 of them?
Correct. So right now it is Brashear, Pittsburgh Classical Academy, Langley, Westinghouse. I don't have the list in front of me, so I'm going off the top of my head right now. Oh, Obama, Pittsburgh, Oliver.
Finley's still around, or Perry?
I haven't been to Perry yet. So I applied for a grant 2 years ago to get this funded, and I had a whole expansion plan then. And then I reapplied for a grant just a couple months ago with a whole new expansion plan. So I am, no, Laura, he doesn't get a soda. I'll come up with the last 3. Don't say that. We're also working with Malayans and City Charter, which is a charter school, but still, my brain is like cruising through the neighborhoods trying to figure this all out. But you get the point. Like it's full. I've got a full rollout plan to hit all of. No, not King yet, Dwayne. It's on my list. So is Perry. So I kind of have. I used to be a teacher, so full disclosure, and my career was special education. So when I developed the rollout plan, I kind of did it in a way that included like a school that had like an academic base, and then like a magnet school, and then a school that had a specialty, such as like Oliver. Because to be frank, like what the program looks like at Obama, where the kids are super cerebral and come at me with all kinds of questions about civil liberties and civil rights and so it's very different than what it looks like at Oliver, where we spend one-on-one time with the kids once a week, getting to know them, breaking down boundaries. So one is like more education based and one is more social based. And I think it's really important that we take the time to do that and to be cognizant of that, and to develop the program around what the student voice needs. So so my whole rollout plan, and my kids are also students at Pittsburgh Public, so I kind of know a bit about how each school works, and and it's also a real hurdle at every school to meet the principal, to get the teachers on board. And like, I've been fighting for this for 8 years, between my time as a civic, as the community engagement office, and then also when I was a community resource officer. And you can just walk in there and be like, I have teaching certifications, but it doesn't matter. Like Pittsburgh Public is very selective about who they let in their schools. So it's been a real fight for sure.
It's an excellent program. I worked at Eastside Neighborhood Employment Center, and we were trying to recruit people for the police academy and some of the big recruitments. I'm definitely going to be reaching out to you to talk to you more. I'd love to roll this out with young adults too.
I agree with that. And I think it's really important that we get Pittsburghers to become Pittsburgh police.
Absolutely.
That all day long. Like, you should live where you work and work where you live.
Yeah. Kevin Wilson's my cousin, so I'm all for it. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. And thanks, Sergeant Costa. And Dwayne from Perry Hilltop also says, I can help in any way with Perry and King.
Oh, thank
So
you.
I will be sure to connect you.
Yeah, thank you. Principal Watson, I don't think he's there this year, but he was my kid's teacher. So I had a little bit of an in and then he moved on. But I'll reach out to you, Dwayne. Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Oh. Oh, yeah, Dwayne said thank you. All right. Okay, I think if there's no more questions for Sergeant Costa, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it. Let's give some emoji claps.
Oh,
There we go.
thank you.
Thank you so much for being here and for all of your work and service to the city.
I feel like I'm way better at presenting in an actual physical space because I'm like largely mobile and it's very hard to get used to this Zoom space. So if I tripped over my words, it's because I'm sitting still, which is very hard to do.
It's very hard to do. I think you did a great job, but it is true. You are an infectious and magnetic energy in the room. So we'll look forward to seeing you again soon in person. Okay, and so next we're going to move on to Sergeant Bristow. Sergeant Bristow, do you want me to share my screen with the PowerPoint that you sent me earlier?
Yeah, I mean, if in sake of time, I mean, do you think we have enough time to actually go through it?
Yeah, I think we can do that. You know, if we'll work it out. I wanna give you the time that you
I
deserve.
will shorten it as much as I possibly can. So while she's getting it loaded, I'm Sergeant Bristow. I've been a police officer for 14 years. I've been a sergeant for 6 years. I've worked Zone 1, Zone 6, Zone 4, the Special Events Office, which seemed to be something people wanted to know about. And believe me, it's still a work in progress. I've also been on the Flood Response Unit, Street Response Unit, and then the Special Response Team. Currently, my favorite job of all is the training academy. That's where I'm currently at right now. I've been here since 2016. And so I'll go over quickly just a little background on our training. It seems to be what a lot of people are interested in this year. We are governed by, like the chief said, MOPEC. That stands for Municipal Police Officers Education and Training Commission. They govern all of the municipal agencies in the whole state of Pennsylvania. The only thing they do not govern is the Pennsylvania State Police, but Pennsylvania State Police has oversight of MOPEC. So the standard training across the state, except for Pennsylvania State Police, is handled by MOPEC. But like I said, there's a lot of continuity between the two, being as they have oversight. In 2018, Pittsburgh was allowed to, for the first time ever, actually create their own Pittsburgh-based curriculum to give to our officers, our recruits. So this had never been done before. It was always something that had been handed down to us from MOPEC, and we had to teach what they gave us. So in 2017, they gave us learning objectives, and they said, you now have the ability to make it, because what does Pittsburgh really need to know about rules of husbandry and things like that? That's more for rural PA. So what we did with that, it was a major undertaking, probably like some of the most stressful years of all of our lives here at the academy. We took it and we asked the people who we deemed to be the experts. That may have been people from our headquarters, homicide or sexual assault detectives, it may have been civilians. We asked for their input, and we took the curriculum and we made it Pittsburgh's, like I said, off their learning objectives, and we even had to make our own test questions. It was a really substantial haul, being as the majority of us in the police world are not prior educators. So it was really a massive undertaking. So the education that Pittsburgh police officers get is made by Pittsburgh police, in cooperation with other people, with objectives given by the state. Like the chief said, and I provided you guys the document of what our curriculum is, the outline. We do 929 hours out of the state mandated training. That's what we have to do. And then we add on 480 hours additionally. This ends up making our training academy about roughly 9 months long. After an officer successfully completes our training, they then take the state certification exam. It's a 3.5 hour long exam that they must pass. If they pass that, they're then on to their next phase of training, which is almost at about 4 months now of in the field training with a field training officer. If they successfully pass that, they then get to be a police officer on their own in the city of Pittsburgh. So overall, we used to have the longest training academy in the country. I've heard now that other training academies are you could go to the next slide, sorry, starting to catch up with us or meeting us or around the same level, but we're still probably within like the top 10 of the longest training that there is. And it's important, it's really important. I'm really glad to see that other departments across the country are starting to realize how important it is to have highly trained officers. Our test scores on the certification exam are always the highest in the entire state. We have never seen the certification exam other than when we took it 14 years ago. And it's a new curriculum that's based off of, and we're every single testing cycle, Pittsburgh police recruits show the highest test score. So I think that speaks volumes for the staff at the training academy. The majority of our staff here are younger officers. When I say younger, they're at like the 8 to 15 year time frame. And of course we have our essential capstones here that have been here for a long time and know everything back and forth, but everyone here is really vested in making sure that we put out the best police officer that has the, guardian mentality and is ready to serve the city of Pittsburgh. We have about a 10% attrition rate. It's fluctuated, it goes all the way from about 0 to the most we've ever had is a 20% attrition rate. That can be due to termination for not meeting our standards. That may be that they find a job somewhere else, and we've had recruits that just actually said, I'm actually a little bit too nervous to do this. And we're like, hey, that's great. We're glad you found that out while you're here. Our training academy, we actually also do all of our entire sworn staff. So police officers are required to have 12 credits of continuing education every year. We do that here, of course, because of the pandemic, we've gone virtual. But a lot of that training that is made and distributed to the entire state of Pennsylvania has been, every single piece that I know since 2016 has had an officer from Pittsburgh on the board creating that training that goes out to the whole state. And just to back up, when we did our rewrite of the curriculum, there was multiple training academies across the state that reached out and asked if they could have ours. So I think it's really great. I think our training academy really does just a phenomenal job. They really do, and it really shows. So on top of the 12 credits that we train every sworn officer on in the year, we do biannual CPR research with the officers. We do a yearly firearm certification with them. Every officer gets defensive tactics training every year. Every officer gets a taser recert every year. And we ensure when we're doing those trainings that we're going, very deeply into use of force. We're going into the most current case law that's come out with that. We're making sure that they're, up to date with everything. And we always, in every single facet of our training, our biggest question is, how much de-escalation do you teach? Everything we teach is de-escalation. We never teach any sworn officers, recruits to go in and escalate a situation. But we do have sections that we've titled de-escalation, but de-escalation is peppered through our entire training. And we make sure within service that every year during defensive tactics and during taser education that we are making sure they understand the principles of de-escalation. And then a very unique thing that we do here in Pittsburgh is all of our sworn officers go through scenarios every year. And within those scenarios, there's always a de-escalation scenario in there that they have to actually show us that they're capable of doing it and they're doing it. And those yearly in-service trainings, those are done all the way from if you're a 1 year on patrolman to Chief Schubert. He goes through the same training every year that our year 1 officer goes through. And he goes through the scenarios, through the firearms, just like everyone else. So everyone has the same yearly training done. I gave you guys the curriculum. As you can see, the one on the screen, this is the state curriculum. I don't know if there's anything you guys want to kind of deep dive into on there. And then if you could go to the next slide, Leah. This other training is Pittsburgh specific training that we've created and we've put in there. And it's always a work in progress. And I just threw in a couple pictures of our recruits doing some of the trainings. I gave you also the article about the Prison Inside Out program. I'm really proud of it. Tiffany's been a part of it. Chief Schubert has come to events for it. It's a really amazing training that's garnered national attention, where we take our recruits into the prison for 4 Fridays out of each class. And it's a one-on-one learning environment where we, make sure that both sides are being humanized and understanding where they come from. And we educate each other. We learn from each other. It's a very organic class, kind of similar to what Sergeant Costa was saying. We almost kind of see what are the needs of each group that comes through there. So we have had about 300 officers go through there now. And which also means 300 inside guys, that's what we call them, have also been educated on what the police are doing. And we have right now we currently have Quantico looking at it, New Orleans Police, and California Post, which is like their form of MOPEC. They have a very vetted process to get training, and where PA is really nice. They're like, we can't take away their training, but we can give all the more training that we want. California is a lot more structured, where you have to go through a 2-year process. So California has been interested in putting the prison program into their police training as well. Let me think if there's anything else on there that I want to highlight. I don't know. But with that, we do like restorative justice. All of our recruits are trained in the principles of restorative justice, and they're always really disappointed when they come out and they realize that a place for restorative justice doesn't actually exist. So I think that's really cool point to point out with that. The Homeless Academy that Laura, that is going to be speaking next, she created, I should say, Laura basically created the whole thing. It's an empathy-based training so that the officers understand the resources that are out there, how to use them, and what are people, the basic needs that people need. And officers don't very often get to hear success stories, and officers are very much A-type personalities and fixers. And so what happens with officers is we never actually get to see when we fix things, and we start to think nothing can be fixed anymore. So we're hoping to build a foundation that they realize that, they're really, they really are the helpers. Because I wish everyone could see, I call them the kids, sorry, we're grown-ups in the academy, but when they come in there and all they want to do is help. All they want to do is make the world a better place. And hopefully we're hoping, being as we've got the opportunity to train 1/3 of the whole entire department, that they're really going to start out with that. And, hopefully the things that with Tiffany doing the community engagement and them getting the opportunities throughout their career, that there's really Pittsburgh's always been a fantastic department, but it's really getting great. If you guys have any specific questions these are some of the people we work with. We don't believe that it should just be police training police. We use, the universities. We were part of the National Initiative for Trust and Justice with John Jay College. They sent 6 of us to Chicago a few years back to learn procedural justice, which at that time was just procedural justice 1, and then procedural justice 3, which is implicit bias. Procedural justice 2 was kind of like a skeleton of a training. We brought that back to Pittsburgh, and PJ1 basically stayed what they created, which, is instilling like trust and giving people a voice and letting people understand the process and things like that. That stayed the same. PJ2 kind of became, it was called tactical legitimacy. So that was teaching ourselves to understand the process and to make sure that when we're interacting with the public, that they understand the process, because a lot of times we go into neighborhoods and we do things that look really scary or maybe really scary, and then we just wrap up shop and leave, and that's really bad, right? So that's kind of a really short amended version of PJ procedural justice 2, and then procedural justice 3 was implicit bias, and that was made by Yale University and the NIJ and John Jay College. So that's what has been rolled out here. And then our police trainers have actually gone out and trained civilian businesses and things with implicit bias. So I thought that was really cool that police were actually teaching, civilians implicit bias. So that's just one of the things. And we work with FEMA, Autism Connection, Carlo, Dr. Sheila Roth at Carlo is doing the trauma-informed care. The Holocaust Center does an ethical decision-making, and we talk about law enforcement's role in the Holocaust. And we have the domestic violence shelter come in to make an enhanced domestic violence training. We went to New Orleans. We were asked to come down to New Orleans for, this was before George Floyd had happened. This was last year. They had asked us to come down about peer intervention. And because we were actually already doing it here. They have a program there called EPIC. So basically what we call it here is de-escalation, and it's self, peer, and then others. So the peer intervention, of course, is that. So with New Orleans being on there, that's kind of what that's about, because I know de-escalation is really interesting to people right now, but Pittsburgh's kind of been doing this stuff. We just don't have the fancy packages that people title things and name them something and then like put them online for others to replicate, because we've been in a mass hiring for a while. So hopefully now that there's a standstill on the hiring, we can actually start to maybe package some things and share some things out, because what the chief said is really important is there is not equity in training at all. And that's not fair to the citizens of Pennsylvania. That's not fair to the citizens of the United States of America. So hopefully we can start sharing better. And the one thing that the pandemic has brought is the opportunity for us to really connect with people in other places in a really thoughtful, meaningful way. So that was sorry for talking fast, trying to get it all in there, but
no, that was
appreciate
perfect.
Everyone being here, and it's more important than ever to be a part of civic discussions.
Thank you so much, Sergeant Bristow, and that was perfect. Great presentation and a lot of great information in there. And just so everyone knows, all of the supplemental materials that Sergeant Bristow and our other presenters have mentioned tonight will be available on our Engage PGH page, where all of the videos and documents are. So definitely look out for them there. So do we have any questions for Sergeant Bristow? Let's see. Amanda?
Hi, I was waiting because I just have like a question that I didn't think was super important and wanted my fellow community members to have the opportunity first. But anyway, my name is Amanda Primrose. I am a resident of the Mexican War Streets. And I was just curious, if somebody from another city, let's say, moves to Pittsburgh, they were a police officer in their previous employment, and they moved to Pittsburgh to become a police officer here, what are the training requirements in order to attain that job?
So it depends if they're coming from outside of the state or inside the state. So I could tell you guys about both.
Yeah, that would be great, yeah.
Okay, so if they're coming from outside of the state, this is a brand new thing that the commission has put out. They actually have to go to a 2-week training in Hershey at the Pennsylvania State Police Barracks. So if you're out of state, you must go to that now. And they actually modeled that off of what we do here in Pittsburgh. I feel like I'm bragging about Pittsburgh, but we all should be bragging about Pittsburgh. We didn't take lateral transfers without training them to our standards and making sure they meet our standards. So they have actually adopted that. They do a 2-week training, make sure they meet the standards. They then have to pass our accreditation exam. If they then pass that, they could apply for Pittsburgh, and we call them certified police recruits. They then go through about roughly 10 to 12-week training here, depending on how big our certified class is how fast we can get them through our training. So we basically everything that's on the third sheet that I shared with you guys, that's the Pittsburgh-based training. All officers have to go through that. They came from other places. So with the exception, sometimes we put them through the prison program, but sometimes we just get one certified recruit and we can't have that program with just one. So that part is the only part that's a little bit different, but we do make them go through and we make sure that they meet our standard to serve here in Pittsburgh.
Great, thank you so much for that information. All right, it looks like let's go on to Allie.
Hello, I'm curious if the training in the department serves as a resource to any other municipal departments in Allegheny County who have different standards and have different budget constraints also. So I wonder if there's ever any sort of training partnership as far as curriculum goes? And then a second, if I could sneak it in, I'm curious, when I saw the partners that you have in many education institutions, I wonder if you get to work closely with people who are in education in developing like techniques that just promote, that are good for, adult, trainees on the job training.
So I'm going to start with your last thing. When we went to New Orleans, they actually have an old professor that taught other teachers to teach in their training academy. And we were like, oh my God, we love you. This is so great. Because there's only one of our staff here, well now two, that actually have a teaching degree. So that would be wonderful. And that's definitely we've been in this mass hiring. So that's definitely something that we're looking into doing, the new micro certification things that everyone is doing. We would like to go for something like that because we literally get 5 days that's all they give us to teach us to teach. So of course, anyone that knows teaching, that is not enough. And so we've kind of had to take under our wing, our instructors, we have adjunct instructors that come in that you kind of have to develop up to, and I'm still not the most comfortable myself. It's a process because I've never actually been trained. I'm sorry, what was the first question?
Partnership with other municipal police forces on their training, particularly, smaller ones who have different standards, but might have the impetus to just improve standards and do that through training.
So we share, with what we have, we do share. We're very open to share it with Allegheny County. Their police academy basically takes most of ours, and we've taken, we've received things from other places too. And being as we do have the capability, because we have the full academy, if we have open spaces in certain classes, we've allowed other departments come in. The implicit bias training, of course, everyone was really interested in. So our trainers went out and did other departments, and it's totally for free. It's not any cost to them because we realize that they don't have the budget. So when we're capable of doing that, when we have the manpower to do that, we absolutely share what we can. Like I said, we would like to now be able to package our stuff better just to give to others to, do what they want with it because they just don't have the resources to do it. So we're definitely really open to do that with anyone that needs it and anybody that wants to work with us.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And looks like we have a question from Bill as well.
I saw it was either 20 or 60 minutes, and it was around training on implicit bias. I don't know if you saw that, but it was about a lot of police academies were trying to roll that out, and it was being done, literally where speakers were saying, I know you don't need this training, it's garbage, don't pay attention. I mean, it was just watching a traffic or train wreck of adult education. I was just curious, when you do your implicit bias training, do you find that people, take it serious and pay attention? And I'm curious if you saw that also and what your reactions were to that report.
There we go. I did not see that report, but I totally our implicit bias training is a really technical training. It goes into a lot of, things about the brain and hard concepts that you have to understand. So I know when they selected the people for it, they made sure that they selected the people that would understand it, that would be able to then translate it back to the officers, and also the people that believed in it. At least here, the days are done of we're just putting people in front of our recruits because they want to teach or, for an overtime card. We do not do that here. We really vet who goes in front of our officers now, our recruits and our officers now. And if we find out that they're going in there and they're saying, they're using stigmatizing language, or they're, saying this is bullshit, but we got to do it for the state, they're gone. That's just the way it is now. We have 10 more in your place now. And so it's become a lot more professional here where, people are actually, we almost have we have a wait list of people that want to teach here now because we're really a lot more selective on that, because there's no point in teaching anyone anything. If you don't believe in it, you don't know how to give it, it's, you know, you're wasting everybody's time. So we really live on that principle here with that. So does it still happen? You know, every once in a great while, you know, and you're going to have, you know, things like implicit bias. If the people you're coming into it with the bias that, you know, you're just going to sit here and say, I'm no good, I'm a racist, I'm this, I'm that. So we always have to start out with, you know, just like anyone else, you know, with the icebreakers and things like that, that make people understand it's not a personal attack on them. And they did, you know, there was a lot of chatter before coming to those trainings that, you know, it was going to be crap. And then all of the reviews that, you know, the post-training reviews that we got about it, they loved it, you know, and it was great. And I hear them using the words now, you know, those words that came from there are now a part of our common language in the department. And that really makes me happy as a trainer. That's one of the most important things you can see. Is that, and today we had suicide training this week with the recruits for 2 days in a row. They had, you know, mental health first aid and suicide prevention and stuff. And I actually seen the recruits use them in their scenario today. He used his suicide training, and I just, as a trainer, that's the ultimate reward you can get, is seeing that out there. And, you know, we do, I see the everyday officer using it, and I see the recruits using the words. So even some of the ones that sat there like this, I still see them come around, and, you know, it got in there somewhere and came out. So it's good.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Sergeant Bristow. This was a super informative presentation, and I think it, you know, gives a lot of insight into all the thought and consideration and hard work that goes into training our officers at the city of Pittsburgh. So let's give emoji claps to Sergeant Bristow. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it, and thank you for your service to the city.
Thank you guys for allowing me to be a part of your evening. I truly appreciate it.
Of course. And then, so before we move on to Laura and Josh, I think we actually do have time to take maybe a 5-minute break, just get a little stretch, get some water, go to the bathroom, get a snack, whatever you need to, and then we'll come back and finish strong. So let's come back around 7:46, if that's okay with you guys. All right. I'd like to give the full 5 minutes. I'll see you soon. Okay, so we can just jump right in. I'm going to pass this off to Laura Dragowski from our brand new Office of Community Health and Safety. Laura, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so my colleague Josh Schneider is going to start us off and talk a little bit. I'm going to give you a little bit of background on the new Office of Community Health and Safety, and Josh is going to talk to you a bit about substance use, opioid use, and overdose, and the stigma associated. But very quickly, you know, I know you guys have different formats and ways of engaging. Please feel free to unmute and interrupt if you want to. We'd love to keep it as interactive as Zoom can be. We realize it's Zoom, and Leah's doing an amazing job facilitating, but we want to make sure that you feel like you can jump in, cameras on, cameras off, whatever works for you guys. Josh, go right ahead.
Great, thanks, Laura. It's so great to see everyone here. I was thinking while I was listening to other presentations that it's truly inspiring to see the number of people that are interested in learning about city government. So really glad that you're all here and we get the chance to speak with you and present what we have today. So today we're going to talk about the Office of Community Health and Safety, and like Laura said, there we go, a little bit more about harm reduction and stigma and opioid overdose and substance use disorder. So just a brief overview of what we're doing today. And then I'll kick it off to Laura just to start to talk about the Office of Community Health and Safety.
So I'm just going to give you a quick background. So my name is Laura Dragowski. I, until about a week ago, worked in the mayor's office, working on what we called critical communities, which was really looking at the intersection of public health, human services for our city residents. As some of you guys may already know, because you're Civic Leadership Academy students, The city does a lot of really important basic services. The criminal justice system, courts, probation, jail, human services, public health are all at the county. But we know that with a quarter of the county's population and a lot of unmet needs in our community, that we wanted to have greater connection with those entities and the partners in the community who do the work. So for the last 3 years, I've been doing that work. And one of the maybe unanticipated opportunities was that I worked a great deal with public safety. So Sergeant Klein Costa, Sergeant Bristow, Chief Schubert, Assistant Director Schmidt, had the privilege to work with all of them. And my background, I come out of some various experiences in research management, working with the FDA at a biotech company here, but I also spent a lot of time working with what's called a syringe exchange program, which probably when we have more time some other day, if you guys ever want to reach out and ask about it, I can provide more detail about that. And I've also worked with programs that provide housing for people who have had really complex barriers to housing. So my background comes kind of varied, but Josh is going to talk more about harm reduction, but a lot of what I've thought about is harm reduction. And so he'll describe that later. So I didn't come into city government necessarily really relating to or even understanding police or public safety. I had some preconceived notions about what they are and what they do, and I had an extremely eye-opening experience working with them. I think the most critical point to mention is that public safety, as it is presently defined and established, was never meant to deal with the whole host of complex issues that human beings have. However, as Chief Schubert said earlier in the presentation, as we see other systems, people falling through those systems, the last call that's made is to 911. That's your emergency call. This is your true last ditch social safety net or safety net. So when there's any kind of crisis, police, fire, or EMS will show up, irrespective of whether they're the responders that make the most sense. We have 900 police officers, we have 700 firefighters, we have about 200 medics. As such, we have a very, accountable, consistent responder force. So there's this ongoing conversation about hiring police, right? And I think one of the things we think about is if we have 1,000 calls for service a day, 300,000 calls for service a year, we have to hire people to handle those calls. If you as a city government are experienced in and sort of tasked with hiring police, fire, EMS, environmental services, PLI, probably you guys can name all of them better than I can, you sort of have to take your pick. This year has been, as Chief Schubert said, and Assistant Director Schmidt said, deeply difficult for everybody for myriad reasons, but public safety specifically, because it's been a real force of change, whether we're talking about the pandemic or about the country's recognition and reckoning with the involvement of police in a lot of these situations. So the good thing that comes from pressure and, using our First Amendment right to free speech is that change happens. So for about the 3 years I've been here and probably years before, there has been this real recognition that police, fire, and EMS are not always the right responders. And we got, enough momentum, I'll say, to really start to build out how we want to respond and how, more importantly, how our community wants us to respond. So from that was born the Office of Community Health and Safety. And I realize I have this little Google form here that I intended to send out as a survey. So if anybody is so inclined, we have a pre and post survey that I will put briefly in the chat. And you guys can send out, if you have a moment, take a quick note and respond to that. It's super helpful for us. So anyways, back on track. I know I mentioned our first responders are 24/7 safety net. They acknowledge that they are in situations that require longer term engagement, different types of responders. If someone doesn't eat their broccoli, we don't necessarily want an officer going. There's probably mom's exhausted, kids are exhausted, things are getting tense, pandemic, we're all sitting in houses and apartments, hopefully, a lot and around each other a lot. But this afforded us, an opportunity to say, who is the correct responder? Who's the right person to be here? And that's a nuanced question, because we could say, oh, well, we want a social worker. Well, what a social worker means in one community is very different than what a social worker means in another community. One person may say, I feel comfortable, I feel safe. Another person will say the social worker is the person who showed up when someone was about to take, split our family apart. So it goes deeper than even just perfunctory efforts to say, okay, we're just going to throw a person who's a social worker. We're just going to train an officer to be a social worker. We really want to understand the needs of the community. And going back to what Chief Schubert said about walking the 90 neighborhoods, every individual, every street, every community, and every neighborhood have different character. They have different experiences, different trauma. So what we're really endeavoring to do is not just say blanket approach, City of Pittsburgh gets A. We know that what might work in Carrick may not be what Lincoln Leamington wants. So we're going to have to take a very intensive approach to doing that. So what we're looking for is to create a cadre of really responsive, accountable, community-supported first responders. We also want to think about what's upstream. Why is it that we all get involved right at the point of crisis? Why? What are the 50 things we could have done before that person is standing in front of a law enforcement officer, standing in front of a medic, or hopefully standing? Why are we waiting till it gets to that point? So we really want to think about public health and that intersection between public health and public safety. So, and I see Josh is probably like wiping his head because I got like 5 minutes and I'm about 20 in, huh? So this is something, that I think struck me, which was the police acknowledge that a lot of these situations need to be addressed by individuals who have relationships with people. So it's not even this targeted, like one and done, show up, de-escalate, leave. What do relationships mean? What other agencies, entities, and individuals are the right people to do this work? So I mentioned I have 151,000 citizen initiated, really 300,000 calls for service last year. 2019. We're in 2021. Ooh, what a year it's been. And so what we said is, okay, even if we want to create an alternative set of responders, who are they? And we can't pull back police and leave a deficit, because someone's going to be left there on the phone making a call and no one's showing up. So even the movement toward defund is really about understand, connect with the community, hear their voice, work with our public safety professionals to understand exactly what they're seeing. As I mentioned, it's, we have something around 1,700 public safety direct engagement workers. They know what's going on in communities. We may not always agree, I might be way over here and they might be way over here in terms of what needs to happen, but they're experts in what they see. So what do we do to create this right responder, entity? And we want these partners who are with us, whether they're in the city, whether they're contracted, whether they're in the community, to also be accountable. We need them to uphold a very high standard of service and care in our communities. So, there's this idea of structural, systemic, and transformational change. We know that even when we think of structural issues, structural violence, that's actually the product of systems working exactly as we expected. So we really want to work with the people who are sort of, victim is a tough word, but the people who have been most harmed by our systems, because otherwise we just keep perpetuating it by creating systems, creating entities with the same voices. So who do we actually need to talk to? So, I'm going to hustle through this a little bit. One of the things I saw that made me really nervous were these things on social media. We want to have alternative responders. Agreed. First one, if your brake lights are out and rather than having an officer stop you, you have a community member stop you. In theory, good. Our officers are not running around stopping every car that has a brake light out or a tail light out or a headlight out. And I know the officers on and they can give more nuance to this, but basically officers are making a stop when there's other behavior that makes them concerned. We would not, traffic stops can be there, they require a lot of expertise. We would not want community members doing that. So we really need to dig into why do we make those traffic stops, not let's just throw someone in there to make the, an alternative response. Similarly, if someone's snooping in car windows and rather than having an officer, we have a lay person who's gotten some training. Big concern here is how much different is that than a block watch that escalates to a situation in which Trayvon Martin is killed. So, we want community participation and support, but we've got to be extremely careful. We want to know that the right people who are moving into these spaces are, they're doing so with the right ideas, the right training, the right accountability. The one on the right is something that popped up. I think the spirit is excellent. I can tell you most of those organizations do not have capacity to do immediate response. Prevention Point, for example, incredible organization. If someone experienced an overdose, they do not have the capacity to send out a responder to reverse that overdose. And with this kind of stuff circulating, the challenge is that someone might die of an overdose because we really wanted to avoid calling public safety. So we don't want to undermine the trust in public safety. We want to hear the community that there's a need for more. So 4 components to the office. We're looking at what we call a continuum of support, building out support upstream in the moment of crisis and afterwards. So not just allowing a public safety engagement to occur and then failing to follow up with that person and support them. Public health important practice. What is the way that we prevent something from occurring? What are the ways that we identify issues upstream? What are the community-based initiatives that we can support and launch so that those are ongoing prevention strategies? Community engagement, probably the most important, should go at the top. What does the community say we need? And not necessarily a formal community group. What about the people who have been in the most precarious situations, who have very little trust in us? We want to hear from those individuals, and we don't want to just do the one and done engagement. We want to know engagement looks like, hey, this is what we did. How did it work? What would you change? And then transparency and sustainability. One of the things that's so frustrating is we rely on funding that's grant funds, that's, you know, a temporary, and we get a really awesome program going and then it ends, which undermines community trust. So this is in our press release, and I can send it to Leah in terms of what areas of focus we have. This is our new office. I don't know if anybody likes org charts. It seems like some people do and some people don't, but our 4 pillars here, community engagement, continuum of support, operations around transparency and sustainability, and what we call translational public health. So that's this idea that first responders can see what's happening in the community with an individual patient and in their field of practice. And I want to point to some amazing collaborations, including some that are, you know, Sergeant Bristow is part of. We're looking at pre-arrest diversion. Ultimately, we don't even want someone to have to engage with an officer to get help. We wanted to criminalize behaviors that are associated with untreated mental health issues and other areas lacking in support. So the first step is we have a lot of officers, they want to help, they're in the community. How do we help the officers to refer people to new services and supports? New office we're creating, the new shelter, which is a partnership between the private and public sectors. There's a crisis response group, and the one that I failed to mention, which is, you know, probably one of the most robust, is our program with Allegheny Health Network Center for Inclusion Health, developing street outreach in half of the city that will do regular engagement with individuals experiencing homelessness, but we'll also work with our first responders to co-respond and say, hey, you know this guy, we know this guy, he likes us better. And really we have a relationship, we're gonna work with him, ameliorating the burden on the first responder to have to continue to show up to situations that they don't have the tools to address, and supporting the individuals who are in these situations with a responder who is there to meet their needs and promote their agency. So we could probably talk for that. I've already done a lot of talking, and we could talk about that a lot longer. But the last slide is reach out to me. We would love to hear from you more. As I said, probably the most important part of this is that we don't design this in the dark, that we don't miss community, thoughts and ideas. There's, only 24 hours in the day, but if we could, I think we would spend it in the community and on the phone talking to people and trying to understand what you need. So with that, I will stop my share and turn it over to Josh. Oh, you know what? I have one last slide. Sorry, I forgot Josh. The information that Josh is going to share can be a little bit triggering. Everybody may have had various experiences with substance use, friends, family, themselves. So, number one, if you need to shut off, shut down, dip out, we totally understand. We know that it's really a complicated topic, right? We know that some of what we're going to present may conflict with your ideas and your experience. Your experience is the most important. So what you've experienced is your own, and we do not in any way intend to give you some sense that we're undermining that. We're going to talk a lot about harm reduction. A critical thing is that harm reduction is what we are advocating for in professional practice. How do we promote harm reduction? As an individual, as a family member, we are not advocating for how you do harm reduction and how you work with your family. So, if you want to stop, if you want to interrupt, ask a question, unmute, please do. And now I'm done. Josh, go for it.
Thanks so much, Laura. And I realize as I share my screen here, I didn't get a chance to introduce myself before, but my name is Josh Schneider. I will also be moving into the Office of Community Health and Safety. Recent graduate from Pitt, and I am a paramedic by training. And I will be doing overdose prevention work and some public safety related initiatives in the Office of Community Health and Safety. So I'm really excited about the new office and that we're going to get the chance to do all this great work that Laura just described. So I will be talking about first reducing stigma around substance use disorder, and then moving into some actual tangible skills that you guys can walk away with, which will be around recognizing an overdose and actually administering Narcan or naloxone. And I believe that you all received boxes of naloxone for yourself that you can use. So we'll be going over how to use those a little bit later. But first, I just want to talk about the ongoing opioid crisis. So during 2020, the number of Pennsylvanians who died from COVID-19 is actually on track to, or is going to equal the number of Pennsylvanians who died from an opioid overdose. So, we're seeing this across the country, nationally, in other big cities, and we're seeing it right here in Allegheny County as well. But, we're not hearing as much about it as we did maybe in 2017 at the height of the epidemic. And I want to begin by talking a little bit about why, and using this post from a City of Pittsburgh paramedic on Facebook to kind of illustrate what providers are seeing in the field every day. So I'm just going to read the post right now. So it begins, I tended to an overdose patient on New Year's Eve. Unlike so many others, he survived because he was found before it was too late. Once he was awake, he told me that his insurance had lapsed and he ran out of buprenorphine, a medication they use for opioid use disorder, a few days ago. His medication kept him stable for years, but without it, he ended up buying drugs again and using drugs again. He also told me that it would be the end of January before he would regain access to his medication. I tried everything to get him to go to the emergency room, but he refused because of the barriers to treatment, or because of cost. Record numbers of people died in 2020 from overdose, and barriers to treatment like this are a large part. The patient also told me that he had been doing 1 bag shots of heroin in the same bundle with the same stamp, with the same type of drugs all day, and had been fine. The last one, however, caused him to overdose. The inconsistency in the drug supply is deadly. If you're injecting drugs in 2021, don't do it alone. I'm begging you. I left the patient with 2 doses of naloxone because that was all I had to give. Every overdose death is preventable, and we failed catastrophically. What we're doing is not enough. In a better world, I would have been able to administer a dose of buprenorphine in the back of the ambulance, give him clean personal use supplies, including fentanyl test strips, and then offered transport directly to inpatient treatment. So this is a really great example illustrating what public safety professionals are seeing in the field every day. And a lot of things that were mentioned in that post specifically are tools of harm reduction that harm reduction professionals and providers are using to make sure that people are remaining safe when engaging in substance use. So a couple that were mentioned there were personal use supplies, making sure that the supplies people are using to inject drugs or use drugs are clean and safe so they're not passing on any further disease that's making that person's life more difficult than it has to be. So, we can talk about the principles of harm reduction. So, harm reduction is something that seeks to minimize harmful effects. So we understand that people can engage in inherently dangerous behaviors, but we want to make sure that they are safe in the process of doing that. And this doesn't only apply to people who use drugs. It can be something as simple as a bike helmet or a seatbelt. Riding a bike is something that can be inherently dangerous. But if we make sure that people wear helmets, we're not going to prevent them from riding bikes or make bikes illegal, but we want to make them wear a helmet so that the behavior they do when they're using that is safe. Harm reduction also focuses on the well-being of the individual and the community. We're prioritizing this, and then making sure that we're not being judgmental or coercive in the services that we're providing to people, making sure that autonomy is our #1 priority. And then ensuring that people who use drugs have a voice in the creation of programs designed to serve them, while recognizing that realities of things like poverty, class, racism, sex-based discrimination, and other social inequities are at the forefront of the principles of harm reduction. So this is a general overview of what harm reduction is and how I think is best to understand it. And then this also relates to kind of this legacy of the war on drugs. And I want to read this tweet from a doctor that used to work in Pittsburgh in toxicology in the emergency room to kind of illustrate this. So he said a couple of days ago, what really burns me out is that I can resuscitate an overdose victim, start buprenorphine to prevent withdrawal symptoms, find an inpatient rehab bed, and make a follow-up clinic appointment. But if they're under arrest for drug use, all that gets taken away from them and they fall back through the cracks. So this kind of speaks to the fact that we as a society have criminalized drug use and looked down upon these behaviors when we could be helping them. So all the tools we have to help people get taken away if the person falls into the cracks of the criminal justice system, the criminal legal system. And so we want to prevent this. And then, we also see that there's a huge impact of stigma on substance use disorder. And there are really two main factors that we want to consider when talking about stigma that's applied to diseases and how it's so harmful. So there are really two main factors that affect the burden of stigma placed on disease, and these two things are perceived control and perceived fault. So we can think about this when comparing two diseases. Let's do substance use disorder, which is one that we're discussing tonight, and then cancer. So when you think of someone having cancer, we don't think that that person has any control over their disease, and it's certainly not their fault that they've gotten it in the first place. Whereas society has kind of seemed to view substance use disorder as a person making a choice to engage in that activity, and then that it's their fault that they're suffering from this disease. But in reality, it should be no different than how we think about someone who has cancer. It's not their fault that they're using drugs. It's kind of the social circumstances that led to that situation, and they certainly many times don't have control over that. And it's not a moral failing that they have fallen victim to substance use disorder, and they're not a bad person because of it. And also that stigma negatively affects the entire person. So their access to healthcare. Healthcare providers could look down upon people that engage in substance use disorder, or engage in substance use or have substance use disorder. They can also have poor health outcomes because they may be afraid to seek treatment due to shame associated with using drugs. And their access to essential services like housing, employment, food are incredibly diminished when people are using drugs because of systemic barriers that we put up. So there are some tools I want to go over that we can use to combat stigma against substance use disorder. And the first is to use person-first language. So this means when we're talking about people with substance use disorder, we are making sure that we're understanding that they are a person first. And so there are a few examples of this in the graphic on the right side of your screen. And oftentimes we use words in our vernacular like substance abuser, addict, alcoholic, opioid addict. And we want to make sure that we're using words that or phrases that put the person first. So instead of substance abuser, we can use a word like person who uses substances. You see that we're putting the person first. And it applies to other language too. When people use the term relapse, when people begin to use drugs again after a period of abstinence. But instead we can call this recurrence of use because of all the negative connotations associated with words like relapse. And there are some other examples in that graphic too. We also want to make sure we're using technical language instead of colloquialisms. So an example of this would be saying, if someone has a drug test, not saying that their urine was clean or dirty because it implies that drug use is inherently clean. Is inherently clean or dirty. We should use things like a negative drug screen. We also don't want to conflate drug use with substance use disorder. So using substances, someone who uses drugs on a regular basis may not suffer from substance use disorder because substance use disorder requires this dependence. And then we also don't want to perpetuate drug-related moral panic. So you can actually take a pledge to use person-first language, and this is something that our own mayor took, and you can read the pledge there, and perhaps we can send this around, and it's something you all can take and sign and pledge to using person-first language in your own life and your own conversations with others. So now that we've talked about stigma and kind of the history of harms against people who use drugs and people who struggle with substance use disorder, I want to talk about actually responding to an opioid overdose. So again, you can walk away with some tangible skills. If you encounter this in the community, that you can step up and take action, especially with the new naloxone that we've all been able to provide. So first I want to talk about what are opioids. So opioids are natural synthetic substances that act on the brain. They're often prescribed for pain, but can be used without medical are often used without medical supervision. And what they do is they relax the brain, or they relax the body, and they relieve pain. But it's not just that. I don't want you to think that this is the only use for these drugs and that there are bad drugs. They're used as cough suppressants too. They are used to control diarrhea. And then, I also want to talk about why they're risky. So, in large doses, it can cause you to stop breathing and depress your respiratory drive. And there is potential for dependence and misuse leading to long-standing health issues like mitral valve disorder or mitral valve disease or other heart conditions. This is a video. I don't want to have us watch it now because it's a little long and we're short on time, but we can pass it around. It just goes into the science of opioid substance use disorder and helping understand a little bit more why it really isn't the fault of the person who is struggling with that disease. Just a brief snapshot of some of the statistics of what it looks like in this country and in Pennsylvania specifically. But before I mention this, I want to say that whenever we talk about statistics, we want to make sure that we're not just seeing these people as numbers. They are people with families and loved ones, with lives and jobs and interests and hobbies. And I want to recognize that before just throwing out numbers here. So we can see just the dramatic number of people that have lost the battle with substance use disorder and lost their lives. 70,000 people at the height in 2017. And we think that we're approaching that number again in 2020. And then specifically here in Western Pennsylvania, we can see that there are hundreds of people over the past several years who have succumbed to opioid or who have died from an opioid overdose. So it really is very tragic. So what specifically is an overdose? So an overdose occurs when the opioids, the drugs that people take, overwhelm the receptors in the brain. Basically, on a very simple level, it slows down your breathing to a point where the person stops breathing and they're no longer able to get oxygen to their brain, and they can suffer some really negative consequences because of that and ultimately die. This can be caused by taking more opioids than are prescribed or combining it with depressants such as alcohol or taking more opioids than someone can tolerate. But what increases someone's risk of overdose? There are a lot of factors here on the screen that you can read, but one thing I want to highlight are people that are in prison who have a period of prison or jail that have a period of abstinence, who have not used drugs for a significant period of time, are significantly more likely to use drugs or to die from using opioids after they're released because their tolerance has significantly dropped and the amount they're familiar with taking could be lethal. So specifically how an overdose works. So like I said, the person's breathing will eventually slow and stop. This causes lack of oxygenation in the brain, which then causes the heart to stop, and which can lead to cardiac arrest, seizure, stroke, and then ultimately death. And this is something we want to prevent. And we want to prevent it in this intervening point right here. So between the person's slowing breathing and when their breathing stops. So just quickly distinguishing between someone who's high and someone who's actually overdosing. So if you see someone experiencing the high effects of opioids, their muscles can become relaxed, they can look kind of sleepy and drowsy, they can be slurring their speech. But a true overdose is someone whose breathing is incredibly slow, it's incompatible with life, or has stopped. You may see that their lips are blue, or they have no pulse, they have no heart rate. They could be snoring instead of breathing. And when we see these effects, we want to make sure that we're calling 911. So we want to look for these symptoms, and if you're unsure which one you're witnessing, you can always call 911 to be sure. And then, we also want to talk about naloxone. So naloxone is an opioid overdose antidote that is used to reverse the effects of an opioid overdose. So it's a very safe medication that can be used for anyone, including children and pregnant women. It's been used by lay people for 20 years. It's a very, very safe medication. And basically what it does is when the opioid drugs are bound in your brain to your receptors, the naloxone comes and knocks them off so that you begin to breathe again and you can start to reoxygenate your body and your brain and live. So like I said, it's used to restore breathing. And when administered in a timely manner, it saved lives. And that's why I really wanted to get Narcan to all of you guys today, is because you have the potential to save lives too. And then one thing to mention that naloxone and Narcan are interchangeable terms. So naloxone is the generic name and then Narcan is the brand name. So I actually want to go over how to use Narcan. And so I have a box here, and this is the same one that you all received. And what it is simply a nasal spray. So you have the box here. On the box, I'll just mention that there are instructions for how to use it. If you ever forget and you're kind of like panicking in the moment, which is a normal thing to do, you can look at the box for the instructions. And so you grab one of the doses out of the package. There are 2 in the box, and it's in this sealed package. So you just open it up. Again, there are even more instructions in here. And as you can see, it's just a nasal spray. So you pop it out of the plastic here. And you will take this bit and you'll put it up the person's nostril like that. And you'll see that there's a little plunger here that you can push down on. And basically, you push down on it as hard as you can, and it'll spray the medication into the person's nose, and it will deliver the medication, taking effect in about 2 to 3 minutes. So it looks like this. I'll use mine. You can see there was a little spray there. And what's interesting to note, and what I think is really important to understand, is that this drug is so safe, naloxone is so safe, I could have sprayed it into my nose right now, and literally nothing would have happened. It would have been like spraying water into my nose. It'll only have an effect on someone who's experiencing an opioid overdose. So it's totally safe to use. And even if you're not sure if someone's experiencing an opioid overdose, if you use it and you happen to be wrong, there's literally no harm in doing that. So that's very quickly how to administer it. And then, so why are we giving naloxone? Because again, it reverses the effects of an overdose. Anyone can be trained to administer naloxone. You were just trained in how to use it. And again, there's no potential for misuse or addiction. It's not an addictive medication. It's very, very safe medication, as non-toxic as water. And again, won't hurt anyone who hasn't taken opioids. So after you have given naloxone, what some people may choose to do is administer rescue breathing. So because an opioid overdose will stop somebody from breathing, we want to give them naloxone so we can get them breathing again. But since it takes several minutes to take effect, we want to make sure that someone's brain is oxygenated. We can actually, if you feel comfortable and safe, we can help people breathe through rescue breathing. This is commonly referred to as mouth-to-mouth. And I know that we are in a pandemic, so I want to stress that it probably isn't safe to do this on someone that you're not familiar with. I will give you guys a link to buying a pocket mask, which is like a shield that has a one-way valve that can protect you if you want to give rescue breathing to someone that maybe you're not familiar with. But it's very simple. So basically you lie the person flat on their back. You lift their chin up like you could see in the image there, pinch their nose, and breathe into their mouth about one breath every 5 to 6 seconds. And you're looking to make sure that the person's chest is rising and falling. That's how you know you're giving effective breaths. And what this will do is keep the person's brain oxygenated while you're waiting for first responders to arrive and take that person to the hospital. So after administering naloxone, if you're giving rescue breathing, that's one thing to do. You also want to make sure that you're staying with the person for as long as you can or until help arrives. If the person is still unresponsive, even after you give them Narcan, you want to lay them in this thing called the recovery position. And I'll go into what that, basically the recovery position is laying somebody on their side rather than their back. And we do this because if someone is laying on their back and they may vomit and then it'll go back into their mouth, which can cause them to choke and make it much more difficult to help that person to breathe again. So putting someone in the recovery position is very simple. Basically, they're on their back, so you lift one arm over their head, like you can see in the picture here, and then you roll them onto that side, so their head is resting on their arm. And that way they're on their side, and if they do vomit, it goes onto the floor rather than back into their throat. And then if the person becomes responsive, they'll probably be confused. They're not going to remember what happened, so you want to explain what happened, treat them with kindness and compassion, comfort them, and just generally give them support. There's also something in Pennsylvania called David's Law, or Act 139. And what it is, it provides immunity from prosecution for those responding to and reporting opioid overdoses or any drug overdose. So what this is you will not get in trouble if you see someone experiencing an overdose and you stay with them and you call 911. You can't get in trouble for this under this law. And under this law, there's also the Good Samaritan provision. So if you're providing bystander level medical care to them, as long as you're acting in good faith, you can't get in trouble. So basically, it's you don't want to worry about doing anything wrong because this law will protect you. You want to make sure that people are doing something rather than nothing, and they're not afraid to act. So I know that was a lot of information, but just a general overview of what to do in responding to an overdose. So after you recognize that someone is having an overdose, you can attempt to arouse them. You can rub on their sternum to maybe provide some light, painful stimuli to see if they might wake up. If they don't, you can call 911 and administer Narcan or naloxone, and then engage in rescue breathing, and then stay with that person until help arrives. So these very simple steps really give you the ability to save a life, especially if you carry around your naloxone with you. I carry it with me in my car and in my backpack. Brief summary of some do's and don'ts. Again, support the person's breathing, give naloxone, put them in the recovery position, and stay with them. Some don'ts, don't slap them or try to forcefully wake the person up. Don't inject them with any other substances, really only use naloxone. Don't put them in a cold bath or shower, that won't work. And then don't make the person vomit what they may have swallowed. Just rely on the skills that we have taught you here today. And now that you're all trained in how to save a life using naloxone, we have this certificate which we can distribute to you guys. And it shows that you are certified to use Narcan. So congratulations to everyone. And thanks for listening and taking part in this.
Thanks so much, Josh. Those certificates are awesome. Let me try to move my screen back a little bit here. Here we go. Laura says we will email them out, so we will all get digital certificates for Narcan training. Perfect. Well, thank you.
And Leah, just to clarify, sorry, you do not actually need to be certified.
No.
It is legal to have them. We just wanted to give you something in recognition of your effort. Thank you.
Correct. You do not need to carry a certification of any kind. You have them and you are good. All right, well, that was a lot of information, a lot of great, helpful, super thoughtful information from Laura and Josh. Do we have any questions for them?
Yeah, Leah, I do.
Yeah, go ahead.
Josh, you mentioned in the presentation that it should be administered in a timely fashion. What exactly does that mean?
So what it means is we want someone who finds someone experiencing an overdose to give naloxone as soon as they possibly can. So if you find someone that you believe is experiencing an overdose, really just give it as soon as you can. There's no window, just anything will help. We want to make sure that people are doing something rather than nothing. So anytime you feel you can give it. That was a great question, though. Thank you.
Perfect. And just a reminder, Laura did put into the chat a pre-survey before the training and a post-survey if you have time to take that at some point. It looks like Darrell has a question.
Yes, hey, thanks for the presentation. Sorry if it's loud, my heater's going off right now. But I was just, I was curious about the kind of language one would use. I mean, if we were around someone and we were starting to see or maybe suspect that someone was beginning to succumb to symptoms of overdose, like is there kind of like speech or like phrases that you can use, or like, you know, questions that are appropriate to ask someone to really kind of detect whether or not they're having a overdose or not, I guess?
So I think what you can do is you know, just kind of talk to them and ask them how they're feeling, maybe what drugs they may have used. If someone is experiencing an overdose, they won't be able to talk to you because they will be close to or completely unconscious. So if you think someone is on the edge of that, you know, if someone is talking generally, they're probably not experiencing an overdose, but they may, you know, a few minutes from that point. But I would just try to keep talking to them, keep them awake if possible, and then if they do go unconscious and you know, stop breathing, then you can administer naloxone. Does that answer your question, Darrell?
Yeah, for the most part. Yeah. I guess I was also thinking too. Okay, is there anything like to say to like I don't know, I guess there's no way to really know like the kind of situation they be in or like people around them or anything like that. Like, how do you, like, what is, yeah, like, you know what I mean? Like, what's like the best way to like communicate to people around the person and the scenario, like that this is happening, or?
So in that specific scenario, you know, I would just say, if you're able to talk to the person, I'm here to support you, I'm here to help you. If they can talk back to you, say, you know, how can I help, and listen to what they have to say and help them in any way you can. Laura, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, Josh, Darrell, that's a really good question. If there are other people around, you could ask, like, do you know what happened here? You know, any idea? I think a really complicated thing, and it's something that, you know, is probably difficult to get into in the CLA and a recorded conversation, But, you know, Act 139 exists. There are ways that people are supposed to be immune from prosecution or charges associated with calling law enforcement. And not when 911 is called, we recommend you say the person's not breathing. Because, you know, unless you know fully what's going on, this person's not breathing. I have Narcan, this person's not breathing. On overdose calls, the city of Pittsburgh does send law enforcement. We all recognize that that is an incredibly not safe space for people. You know, their behavior is criminalized. Their use of drugs is criminalized. It's been, and you know, I saw Dwayne put this in the chat. It's been criminalized for a very long time. And it's harmed some people much more than others. And even the recognition of it now feels way too late and way too harmful for people. But that being said, there's a lot there. I think the important thing is if it's someone you know, if it's someone that you have a relationship with, and you can have a conversation beforehand, you may want to have that conversation with that individual. If you know they're using drugs, you may want to talk to them about what's safe for them and what they want you to do. Legally, as a city government employee, your protections are extended if you call 911. So you need to do that. And that gives you a Good Samaritan protection. Asking what people know is a really good idea. If you've administered naloxone and someone starts to come out of it, it takes time. It's not going to be a real like jolt. If you whether you know the person or not, you can say, hey, I'm here. I want to let you know public safety is coming. I called 911. I administered naloxone. If that person wants to get up and leave, that is their prerogative. You have no obligation to make them stay. You may want to say that if they have used an amount of drugs that, you know, sort of overrides the naloxone, that they could have additional effects after, you know, they leave. So to be safe and to try to be with someone. It's, you know, there's the training that we can do that's like, hey, this is how you administer naloxone. And then there's the real thing, which is going to feel really different. It's terrifying. It's someone you know, it's someone you don't. Approaching them is scary. Do your best. Everything you do is better than not doing something. And if you do call 911, which of course we recommend, they can coach you through how to use Narcan too. So, and if that person leaves, you know, you just tell them, be safe. I'm here. I'll stay with you while the public safety's here, whatever you need. You know, and Darrell, I think there's probably a lot longer response and conversation we could have. If you want to text us or call us, we would be really open to having it, but it's pretty complicated.
No, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Laura and Josh. And also in the mailings that you got, we so you got the box, you got a pin, like a button, and something that you can put on a window or something like that. So what I do, since I received naloxone training from Laura like 2 years ago, I've just been carrying it around with me everywhere I go. Put a little pin on my bag. I luckily haven't had to use it, but you know, that's just so, you know, you just have it just in case of that emergency. Jacob, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, one more question. I did read on the box where you're supposed to sort at room temperature, Josh. I had the same thought, you know, I'll just keep this in my car until I read that, but you said that you keep it in. So is it, I mean, it's Pittsburgh. Are we able to keep it in the car?
Yeah, so a little example, Miami police officers keep this in their glove compartment in the middle of summer, and it still works. In the really cold, it can work. So, you know, those are the guidelines that are put out by the manufacturer, but we still encourage you to carry it wherever you are because, again, something is always better than nothing. And it does have a very, very large range of temperatures that'll work in. So I would always just go ahead and give it.
Thanks.
And I also saw Amanda had a question in the chat.
Okay.
Just, does it automatically sober someone up who has used opioids? So it usually takes, it depends on how much drugs the person has taken. I say it takes about 2 to 3 minutes maybe to work based on my personal experience. But again, there are a lot of factors that depend there. And then the second question, if they're very high and they want Narcan, at that point, would you administer? I suppose if the person is asking for it and you have it, it couldn't hurt to give. Again, it would be a discussion you have with that person, coming to a decision together.
Thank you, Josh. Looks like Sergeant Costa has a question.
it's really not a question. It's kind of like an anecdotal story. So last time I performed at one of these civic leadership academies, it was one of the first times I met Laura, and she was passing out Narcan to everyone, and I took one and I carry it in my car now. And then here's the funny bit that I love. My daughter lives on the north side in, what's it called, Laura? Deutschtown. And so my daughter was like hanging out in the park and reading a book, and Laura recognized her and brought her over some Narcan and was like, you need to have this in case you're in the park and you need somebody who needs it, or you see somebody who needs it. And I was at her place yesterday and she had her Narcan like prominently displayed so she could grab it on her way out, which I think is great. The moral of the story is the more people that have Narcan, the more people we can save, period. If you have it on you and you see someone in need. I was driving down Green Tree Road a couple months ago and I saw a guy just laying in the weeds beside the road. I pulled over. He was breathing, so I did not administer Narcan, but I knew that it was close to that situation. Like if he hadn't been breathing, it would have been a prime time. But in the meantime, I called 911. But again, because I was off duty, the important thing is that like the more people that have it, and if you were all in the physical space, you would all be walking away with your own Narcan right now. Right, Laura? Yes.
Yeah, they actually had it mailed to them, so they do have some.
That's good. That's good. So keep it in your car and just have it available as needed, or your purse or whatever, like my daughter.
Thank you so much. That's a great insight. All right. Do we have any more questions for our presenters tonight? Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for everyone from police and Laura and Josh who have stayed on the call, taken the time tonight to just present and give your all and share your knowledge and your experiences with Civic Leadership Academy. And thank you to all Civic Leadership Academy participants, especially tonight, for engaging in this while so many other things are going on. So I commend everybody. I'm proud of everybody. And I hope everyone has a restful night. And just one last thing, we got so much information today. I will be uploading all of these PowerPoints, all of the supplemental materials, reports, documents onto our Engage page. So please look out for them and feel free to reach out to me if you want to connect with somebody who we met tonight. All right, so thank you so much. Good night, everyone.
Thank you all.
Good night. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening. Good night.
Night.
Thank you.